Okay, we're going to talk about how to troubleshoot PDTs today. I'm going to try to make it short. Basically, I mean the normal install and stuff should be straightforward. I mean, people should follow the instructions from our manual here. This can be found in normal Docu Data website when you go to support at the top, and then Record Center, manuals, uh, technical manual. I go to the online version, and then from there, in the technical guide over there, there's the PDT section. Basically, this section, we have all three PDTs that we use most. Although now we have also the new H13 PDT. This one is not in the manual yet, but there's a knowledge base article on it. It's number 193. So, yeah. Um, I mean, the normal installation is pretty straightforward. Everything. Anybody that been installing the PDT before, as you would have done anyway, it's pretty straightforward. But the one of the little things that I would have to say actually about the new one, the H13, that differs from all the other ones. There's a little trick to it. And I do believe it's in the knowledge base, but still, to remember, when you program the H13 with upload, before you switch, well, not before, but when you change the switches to be used with EDC, one extra thing you have to do with the H13 is actually unpower the cradle completely. Make sure there's no electricity on the cradle, and then power it back on. If you don't take the electricity out of the cradle, no matter what you do, you're never going to get it to communicate with EDC. The other ones don't need to do that. The other cradles don't need to do that, but the H13 is different. Um, so that's it for that. The instructions for programming, like I said, are pretty straightforward. The only thing, if you send this documentation to customers for them to download it themselves or to program it themselves, one thing that they usually have a problem with is actually finding the config file themselves. Uh, it's in the bin of EDC, right? But a lot of them don't know how to get to the bin. And the easiest way to do that is just to right click on the EDC shortcut, go properties at the bottom, and then there's usually that open file location button. Or on the older XP machines, it's called find target. So click on that, it brings you to the bin. And from here you get all the firmware files. So I usually, explain that when I send them the instructions. Um, but this video is more about troubleshooting when things go wrong. But it can also apply, when you're programming it. Let's say when a customer gets a new PDT and they want to install a new PDT on their machines. You could have to go through all those same steps anyway. One of the things that, obviously, I mean, first things first, the batteries need to be charged properly. And so any signs of low battery on the PDT screen is not good. You need to get rid of that first. The PDT, when it gets received the first time, the battery is not charged. So if people are just unpacking it straight from the box and expecting it to work, it's not going to work. Um, unless they don't use the battery pack that's inside the PDT. Sometimes they can have their own AA batteries in there. If they use that and they're already charged, then that's good. But if they use the OptiCount pack, it needs to charge for at least probably a day on the charge before you can use it. I've seen some people also forget to put the watch type battery. A lot of these PDTs have a little watch type battery that keeps the program alive and the data alive when the AA's are out. Some people don't even put that battery at all in the PDT, and that causes problem. Um, Another problem related to that is a lot of people don't change that battery that often. So when that battery runs out, then that means as soon as you take the double A's out to put new ones in, most of the time it corrupts the PDT. You have to reprogram with upload when that happens. And that's very common actually. A lot of people, they don't take care of that battery, that round one, and so their double A's are dying. They want to change it to new ones. As soon as they do that, um, it actually corrupts the whole program somehow inside the PDT, not just the data, but the program itself too. Like you can't even communicate with EDC after that. Even if your PDT would say your batteries are okay, just the fact that you change them, it will corrupt it, and then you're stuck. So you have to reprogram when that happens. So I try to to tell customers to put themselves like a reminder in their calendar or something to to change that watch type battery every 3 or 4 months. They only cost about $4 anyway, those batteries, so it's not a big expense. Um, so watching that the batteries are good, and like I said, if one of those batteries you expect are no good, or the customer is not sure if they were good, then for sure, if they did change the big batteries at any point and they're not sure about the round one, there's a big chance that the PDT is corrupt and you have to reprogram. Um, Another thing to check for, obviously, is the pins underneath the cradle. Like as it says in the manual here, there's a set of pins for programming it with upload and one to use with EDC. Sometimes that looks very uh, easy, but and I've talked to some people online where I repeatedly ask, are you sure the pins are like that, or are you sure they're like that, depending on what we're doing. Oh yes, they're like that. Ends up, no, they were not. I've spent a day trying to do stuff with some people that they thought that the pins were okay and they're not. But I can't blame them. Some of those pins are really small to see. They're hard to see. So you kind of have to triple make sure that they're okay sometimes. Another thing that goes wrong with these is, you know, most people now use those USB adapters. The USB adapters, some of them come into a really small form, and some of them they look like a big cable. And when you purchase the PDT with the whole kit, the kit comes with a black cable, null modem cable of its own that comes with the kit. But then some people that buy this USB adapter sometimes that look like the big cable as well, so they just plug the USB adapter basically straight into the cradle and they bypass that original black cable that come with the kit. That can't be done because the serial to USB adapter is not made to communicate straight out of the cradle. It needs to have that null modem cable in between the two. So that's another thing to check right away. Make sure the connection is done properly from the cradle to the PC. Because sometimes, like I said, people will bypass that black cable that came with the kit and they will plug basically the USB adapter straight in the cradle and straight into the PC. And that will never work either. Um, Another thing that could go wrong is, although very rarely, but I've seen it happen before. Sometimes Windows, automatically installs some drivers for the USB, but sometimes those drivers that Windows installs are not good, and the device manager won't even tell you. It will look just like this one. It will look like everything's good, because when it's wrong on here, usually you get this little yellow triangle that tells you that Windows is not happy with it. Um, but I've seen it on some machines that you didn't even have that. Windows, from looking at Windows, you would never thought there's something wrong with it. But sometimes there is. It's just not the right driver, and then you have to, uninstall the driver and get on the website and try to find the right driver for it. Sometimes people, they buy an older adapter, they get a new computer like Windows 8, 64-bit Windows 8, say, and the drivers are not even made for that system. Some adapters don't even have a driver for Windows 8 64-bit. So then, they have to try to find another driver or find another adapter that does support their system. Um, and I think that's about it, really. I mean, the thing is to remember is that when everything looks okay, config wise, and that the settings all seem to be okay, but it still doesn't work, a lot of the times it is related to batteries that were changed and the software being corrupt inside of it, and then you have to reprogram with upload. So many times I've done that, just reprogramming with upload right away, boom, everything was working fine again. So that's one of the big things to check for. Um, also, um, I mean, this is pretty obvious, but some people forget that whenever you're communicating with EDC, with the PDT, you know, the receiving end, as I call it, has to be listening first. Like if you're downloading stuff to the PDT has to be receiving before you send from EDC. Otherwise, it'll never work. Same way the other way around. If you're uploading a move list, say to EDC, EDC has to be listening first. You have to have, EDC going back and forth, receiving, listening basically to the PDT before you send on the PDT. Otherwise, that won't work. Um, I think that's about it. Like I said, in general, it's pretty simple, but it's harder to troubleshoot, of course, because we're not at the customer site. We're relying on what they tell us via the phone, and what we can see on screen is only the software part. We don't see what they're doing with their pins and uh, the steps of sequence they're doing when they're sending stuff or not. So it's a bit more complicated in that sense, but as long as we're aware of all the little things that could go wrong, then that makes a few more things to check. So that's about it. If there's more questions, just email me as usual at my address at DocuData, and I'll answer it. Okay, have a good one. Bye.